Kranias. I'm a bilingual health promotion consultant with HC Link. I've been doing this for about 4 years now, based out of Health Nexus. And our theme today is partnerships, which honestly, when I came to Health Nexus, I was excited about learning more and working more with partnerships because I worked at the community level with some neighborhood partnerships as well as program partnerships. And it's been a continuous journey of learning more and getting to know more tools, helping other people use tools. Recently, we did a 2-year project focusing on equity in partnership work. And so that's what I'm bringing to share with our dialogue today.
And hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Bodkin, and I'm also with HC Link, and I'm a settler of British, German, Scottish, and Irish descent. I've lived in 4 different provinces in Canada. In fact, recently I moved to a new apartment in Toronto, and it's the first time I've moved within the same city. And I've also now lived here for 8 years, which is the longest I've ever lived anywhere before. I also spent a year in Australia. And I've been working in health promotion resource centers for nearly all of my 14 years in health promotion. And all of those 14 years have involved working in partnership. Before we get too much further, we just want to do a couple housekeeping notes and let people know that we're going to be mentioning a lot of different resources over the course of today's webinar, and you are going to find all of those resources in the file share box, which is at the very top right-hand corner of your screen. It's called Handouts to Download. And in that box, we have 3 different resource lists. 2 from previous webinars and 1 from today's. Today's is called the Learning Exchange Resources, and we're really lucky because a lot of you actually contributed to that resource sheet. We also have a resource list on partnership evaluation, which my colleague Samia Abdi from Public Health Ontario and I put together. And then there's also helpful tools for effective partnerships, which Gillian and I put together for our first webinar in June. So those files will be available for download during most of today's webinar, so please take a moment to download them because we'll be putting links and things in the chat box and you don't have to look for them the whole time. The resources are available there for you. We also wanted to let you know that we are recording the webinar, and the recording will be available on our website and also on YouTube. And Gillian's going to talk a little bit about the format, which is a unique one for us.
Do we have a slide?
No.
Okay, here I go. So the format for today is that we have a variety of peers across Ontario and beyond. We have a special guest from Alberta who will be answering and asking questions, discussing. We just want to be clear that we're calling this the fishbowl. So these people are within the fishbowl. So far, I think we have Kendra, Julie, Jessica, Yvonne, and Diane online with us, and I'm just waiting for McCanna. We hope she'll join us as well. I got to speak to all these people briefly in advance of the webinar, so got to know them a little bit more and find out what they might in particular be able to help us with as we go through the questions and the dialogue over the session. I do want to add that although we do have a fishbowl, it's an electronic fishbowl, and the glass is permeable. So those of you who are on the outside of the fishbowl, we really want you to partake as well in the dialogue, whether it's on the telephone or through the chat box. So with your own experiences, your own favorite resources, and questions as well. So that's the general format, and we're going to detail it a bit later when we kind of launch into that section, which is the bulk of our time together. We did want to finally just ask that when you are using the phone, because we have quite a few people on the audio who are going to be sharing, just say your name first. Just first name will be fine. So whenever you speak up on something, that would be great if you can remember to do that. It'll help us follow who's who and the links between our experiences and our insights. So we're moving on to the context. So more and more people are working in partnership, and sometimes it's because they want to, often it's because they need to, and sometimes it's because they've been directed to by funders. In fact, I was just recently with a group who had been asked to add another partner to their table. We come at partnership in all kinds of situations. And sometimes it's thrilling and sometimes it's challenging. Most of the time we do see the benefits of it, but I think we're all here today to figure out how to, to get through it all those challenges better and to really optimize the benefits of what we can get out of our partnership work. So everyone online today is someone who actively participates in partnerships already and convenes partnerships. We have lots of years of experience that came through on the registration. Some people just 2 to 5, but others, over 10, 15 years. And certainly in our fishbowl, we have people with numbers of years and also diverse kind of locations from which they're working in partnership. So that's going to be what our base for learning today. So half of us participated in the training. Sorry, half of you have participated in trainings on how to work well in partnership. And this is higher than our earlier webinar that we had in the spring. So that's A, exciting, and B, maybe reflects that this is a learning exchange. So this is the kind of space that we've created today. So of the 59 people who registered, 32 had not received any training and 34 have attended a webinar or workshop. 14 have done independent reading and 7 have taken a course. Meanwhile, we still work in this environment where most of the people we're working with, their education and even our own education may have been in quite competitive environments. And so some of the principles of working in partnership, although we embrace them, we may not be, have as much depth of experience and training with them. Hence our core service offering at HC Link.
Yeah, so
Andrea.
This is new for us this year. We're doing a whole capacity building series called What Successful Partnerships Do. And there's a whole different series of events that are involved in this series. Gillian and I did a webinar on the 6 key activities for successful partnerships back in June. And in case you missed that webinar and want to catch up on it, the recording and the materials are posted on our website, hclinkontario.ca. We also had a French learning exchange last week, and then of course we have today's learning exchange in English. And following each of the webinars and learning exchanges, we have coaching sessions that you can sign up for. At the end of today's webinar, when the webinar closes, you're going to automatically be directed to an Eventbrite where you can register for a coaching session with Gillian or myself or our colleague Patrick Delorme. And you can have as much time with us as you like, free of charge, compliments of the Government of Ontario who funds our services. And we can work through any particular challenges that you're having, talk about how HC Link can support you a little bit more, and find out what kinds of supports and services really might benefit you in your partnership. Also, of course, we have to plug our conference in November. I know I have a slightly biased opinion, but I honestly do think this is going to be the best conference ever, and I'm inventing #BestConferenceEver. But we also have a few workshops at the conference on the topic of working in partnership. And of course, we have a whole bunch of educational resources on this topic that are posted on our website that you can view as well.
Okay. So again, we're going to look at what we're going to do today in today's learning exchange. We are going to spend a little bit of time with some presentation after this slide that's introducing our agenda. But after that, we're going to do a go-around of the participants within the fishbowl where they will introduce themselves and respond to sharing a story based on an introductory question that we put together. That will get things going. And from there, we have organized the questions that came in on the registration form into themes. And so then we'll be going through those questions and inviting our fishbowl participants as well as all of you who are online to get involved in some dialogue thinking and some resource sharing and experience sharing based on that. So we have the questions from the registration form. We have one question from the online discussion that was up last week, which we'll also look at. And then we have a few that we prepared ourselves in advance and also when talking.
How I want to go.
I just wanted to mention as well that we do have the chat box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and you can use that to ask questions or post comments or share resources, and we're going to periodically have other chat boxes that pop up today where you can also participate. But we really hope that everyone on the line, our wonderful fish, but also all of you will participate through that permeable glass, as Gillian mentioned, in today's exchange. So we wanted to start off today with just a quick overview of the 6 activities for successful partnerships. We did a full webinar on this way back in June. It seems like a longer ago than it was actually, Gillian. And a couple of things we just wanted to mention about these. Both Gillian and I have kind of an interesting relationship with the word successful because we think that partnerships, it's kind of a difficult word to apply to partnerships. But one of the things that we have found in the course of the work that we have done is that when there are partnerships that are working well, they're meeting their goals, they're functioning, people are participating, everyone's enjoying being part of the partnership, there are 6 things that those partnerships tend to do. And one of the things that's very easy, I find, in our health promotion world where we're so used to models and processes, we like to think that things are activities that we do sequentially, and we do one before we move on to the other. But with these 6 activities, they're not steps. They're not something that you do once and then you move on to the other. They're 6 activities that should be continuously done throughout the life of your partnership. And when you are facing a challenge within your partnership work, one of the things that we'd encourage you to do is to go to these 6 activities and take a peek at them and think, you know, is there one of these that maybe we could do again in my partnership? Is there something that we should revisit? Is there something we should go back to or re-clarify? Because 99 times out of 100, when people have a question about, you know, having their partnership function a little bit more, if you go back to these 6 activities, it's really going to help your partnership move together more successfully. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at our 2-page handout, the 6 activities for successful partnerships, do look it up on the website because that will be really helpful for you moving forward. So we asked people when you registered of these 6 activities, what are some of the things that you feel like your partnership does really well, and what are some of the things that your partnership finds challenging? Now the interesting thing, as you can see from these 2 graphs, is that they're pretty much equally dispersed. There's a little bit of variation between the 2 categories, but more or less, some partnerships have strengths in some areas and others have strengths in others. And that's the real benefit of something like today's learning exchange, where we get to hear from other people who may be experiencing strengths where we have challenges and vice versa.
Okay. So we are going to now move into the fishbowl, but just before we get there, we want to give you a little bit of background on why are we taking this approach. So this is a model for adult education that I was trained under, and it really emphasizes collaborative learning and creating those kinds of spaces. Now we're in a webinar format, so Andrea and I are trying to be creative with that. How do we bring this kind of approach of collaborative learning to a webinar format? But just let me take you here through the spiral and give you some ideas of where we see the links for effective education for action, because of course we're not just learning in an abstract place here. It's really about learning to apply in our work. So the real emphasis with this approach, the spiral model, is to start with the experience and knowledge of participants. So, I mean, that's why we ask you questions in the registration form, and that's why we want to get people talking and sharing. And really, today we're spending most of our time in this place. We will move to number 2 as well near the end, looking, and probably throughout as well. People may make comments. We really invite those kinds of comments about patterns that you see, or even if it's reminding you, if the dialogue and experiences are reminding you of a particular resource or framework that may be more theoretical. That brings us a little bit to number 3, but it's not so much Andrea and I who are adding that new information in theory today. It's going to be from the group as a whole. From there, if it's education for action, we're moving towards planning for action, taking action, and then coming back round again, right? And returning back to reflection. So it's the evaluative and reflective practice. In terms of number 4, plan for action and taking action, we want to remind you about the coaching, because that's a way, if you feel like you would like to connect with us again around your own particular moving forward, then that's something we can do with you via a coaching session. Certainly you can also turn to colleagues and other peers, etc. Here we are. Here's our fishbowl. We're going to do a go-around. And just to let you know a little bit about what I learned about these people when we had our chats is that a couple of people are from public health contexts. We have Yvonne from Alberta, who's coming from who also works as a city councillor, or sorry, a community councillor, sits on council, so is a politician, so I think that's pretty exciting. We have now Julie, I got to remember who's who here, but Julie, who is at a community resource center, so doing a lot of really community-based work as well. And I don't know if McKenna made it to join us today because we weren't able to connect with her ahead of the webinar, but McKenna is coming from a community services hub, which is pretty different as well. But we don't think that she's made it with us. So I want to get into the introductions and my introductory questions, and we're moving over now to, we have to restart everyone's webcams, to ask everyone in the fishbowl to please restart your webcam or start it for the first time if you hadn't already. And we'll get at least some of us online this way for those of you, well, for everyone to wave and take a look at. And so I think maybe what I'll do is I'll start with the people who are on the webcam, and then we'll move through the others who are with us. So there's 5 people today in our fishbowl. And what I ask people to do is to share your name, your organization, and the focus and region of your work, so a little standard introduction. And then to share a story. Share with us what partnership experience or which partner taught you the most about partnership work and why. So can we start with Yvonne out west? It's not too early out there, Yvonne?
No, it's all good. It is 20 after 11.
Great.
Good morning. Well, for me it's good morning. For you guys it's good afternoon. So my name's Yvonne Rempel, and I live here in Grand Cache, Alberta, which is in the Northern Rockies, just north of Jasper. If most people are familiar with Jasper, Banff, we're in the northern tip of the Alberta Rockies. My role is a community health promotion facilitator with Alberta Health Services, and we are currently working on the Alberta Healthy Communities approach to community cancer and chronic disease prevention. And we've been working on the community cancer prevention piece now for about almost 5 years within Alberta. It's a pilot project, and we're very excited about that in that community development realm. On the my other hat that I wear for the last 8 years is I've been a town councillor. So when we talk about community partnerships, my hat as a community councillor as well as a community health facilitator mesh very well in regards to not only building partnerships at the local level. I have the opportunity to go provincially or regionally, provincially, and nationally. So it allows me to bring other community resources, liaison with a variety of different community groups when I work with my communities in creating that healthy communities approach in my communities through my development. So yeah, that's really basic about community partnerships.
Great. And so will you share with us what partnership experience taught you the most?
Oh, that's a really good question, and sometimes it depends upon the day and which hat I'm wearing. I really enjoy the community aspect and working with communities to help them identify those successful partnerships, and every community has them. Sometimes we have a difficult, hard to get started as looking internally or looking within what our current assets are, and so on and so forth. I guess often we look at that circle or of action items and whatnot. Often I jump right to celebrating community successes and celebrating those community stories to get people to work together. Celebrate what's already have and those local assets in our community, and often those community partnerships at the basic community level kind of foster themselves. So that's what I find exciting. And then if I'm wearing my other hat, the municipality or your town councils or city councils should always be aware of what's happening around in their community. They don't necessarily have to take the lead, but they should always be sitting at the table. Does that answer your question?
That's great. Well, I was just reflecting on how you said you started with celebrations, and I think that's a great way to make sure that we don't think of the 6 activities as linear. Because sometimes they get written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and celebrates at the end, and you're saying that there's real power in celebrating first as a way to start building the relationship.
It's a great way to kind of that ignite or bring people to the table, because it's easier to bring people to a table of success and building that community engagement piece that way versus, you know, inviting someone to come to a meeting to create an action plan or to set a strategic plan. There's a little bit more work involved. So. Yeah.
Thank you for that tip. Great. Okay, so we're going to move to Diane next. Diane, do you want to introduce yourself and then tell us which of your learning experiences you decided to share?
Sure, certainly, not a problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Coppola. I'm currently a health promotion consultant with Public Health Ontario, the health promotion capacity building team. I've only joined the team a couple of months ago, so as further context, I've been an independent consultant for several years. I have also done consulting on behalf of the former Heart Health Resource Center and HC Link, and I've also worked in Niagara Region Public Health. So I am calling in from beautiful Banana Belt, Niagara today. And Gillian, I do have to say I'm thrilled to be a fish today, because as a parent of 2 young men now, I can distinctly remember in their teen years being classified as a dinosaur. So I consider this a promotion of some sort. And I figure in the evolutionary chain of things, the only place I have to go is up from dinosaur to fish. I'm going to be with the Homo sapiens pretty soon, I think. So thank you for that. My story about partnership learning that taught me the most is actually not about a partnership experience, but from learning from my medical officer of health when I was at Niagara Region. And I don't recall the specific context within which this learning came in, but the essence of the learning is this. You need to have 2 conversations. One conversation happens outside of the room or outside of the table, the meeting table, and the second conversation then happens in the room or around the table. And what I took from that was it's hard to build relationships in a group of 20 people. You build relationships one-on-one and connecting with people individually and being able to have conversations that explore, again, their concerns, their worries, their successes, their strengths, and not to spring too many surprises on them. So I gather, when you're a medical officer of health, and not unlike Yvonne, who also has a counselor hat, there's a lot of politics around partnerships, and so you need to be a bit of a diplomat and not blindside people, pull people into a room and ask a question. And so Gillian, you did this very well, invited us to be in the fishbowl, but had one-on-one conversations with us to warm us up, to get us comfortable with what we were going to be doing and what we might expect. So now we're able to come without the baggage of worrying about that. and we can fully, again, participate and be comfortable doing that. So I think for me that's the lesson that I took with partners is sure, invite people to a meeting, but try and connect with people one-on-one before. And it doesn't have to be in person, but it can be helpful. But at least a phone call, some kind of outreach where you're starting to make that connection first, then that will go a long way to helping you continue to nurture that in a larger setting.
Okay, I've just learned two amazing things. Hearing the two of you, I just like, that's great. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, and after the meeting too is a time, you know, or like you say, the phone call, but we have to really make the time and do that. So this is what you chose to share in your opening. So this is telling me how important it is. Thank you, Diane, about making that time for the one-on-one. Okay, let's then go around, and how about Jessica? Jessica's only on the phone with us, but are you ready to share? Introduce yourself, Jessica Lang, and share with us the partnership experience that you learned the most from.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's Jessica here from Elgin St. Thomas Public Health. I'm a health promoter here, and I've worked in public health for 12 years. Most of that time was spent in Smoke-Free Ontario coordination, but in the last couple of years, I took on a new role to work with our Healthy Communities Partnership. And this is a group of both elected officials and municipal staff that are working primarily on healthy public policy and built environment work. And so this was quite the shift from working in tobacco with new partners, a new focus, and new priorities. So in my time, the focus has been mainly on active transportation and working towards implementing the cycling master plan that we helped to initiate about 3 years ago now. And we're continuing to work on a collective trails strategy. And so in my area, one of the challenges is that we have multiple levels of government. So we have an upper tier level of government that sits around the table. That's the County of Elgin. And then we have 8 other lower tier municipalities as well, including the City of St. Thomas. So there's lots of different voices around the table. And we have seen significant change in our community as a result of our collaboration. And I think that is something to be proud of in our community. And I echo what actually Diane said about the relationship building and working one-on-one, because while most of our partnership work happens in a large group, I do meet one-on-one with the chair and the vice chair occasionally just to stay connected and continue building that relationship and getting their perspective on a one-on-one level. And so to answer the question, share with us what taught you the most. I think in my time what I've learned is the importance of being opportunistic and really learning what the priorities are of the partners that you want to work with. And what I've learned is that the people that I'm wanting to engage and continue to work with are busy people and have lots of priorities. And so, when we're looking at working collaboratively and identifying a common agenda, I've learned how important it is to learn what they're already working on or what their existing priorities on and see where that common thread is, where we can all work together. And in turn, I believe that has contributed to them continuing to participate, continuing to come to meetings, continuing to show interest in grant applications, because at the end of the day, that common agenda has to stick. And so I would say that's been my key learning is the importance of understanding local priorities and being opportunistic.
Fantastic. What amazing fish we have, Gillian.
Great.
Terrific.
Okay. So why don't we bring us on to Kendra then, because Kendra, I don't know that we managed to get your photo up. I don't know if you're able to do the web. Oh, I think you said you couldn't do the webcam, but Kendra did send me a photo where she was wearing a lovely striped outfit. And so she's quite, dynamic, colorful fish. Can we bring you on, Kendra, to introduce yourselves? Tell us about your work and where you learned the most about partnership.
Okay, thanks, Gillian. I'm happy to be here. So my name is Kendra Willard, and I've been working at the Halton Region Health Department for the past decade. And I came out as a fresh grad for my master's. So I've learned a lot from those green early days till now. And just like Jessica, I've worked in SFO and then for the first couple of years and then transitioned into healthy built environment work since then. And I'm also part of a two-tier municipality. But mostly focusing on building walkable communities or trying to influence policy in that direction, and a lot around active transportation as well. And my story is probably one of my biggest learnings in partnership. We were trying to, there's a street in Burlington that used to be a highway, and its like history was of a very rural community with farms that went up to this highway and sold fruit along the street. And then it's become suburban, and now it's trying to become urban. So we did this campaign to try to get people to buy into this idea of becoming more urban, because there's a lot of community resistance to all the change. And one of the key partners we had to engage for this campaign was the BIA. And what a learning. They taught me about the importance of all the underlying assumptions I had in working in partnership. I assumed that they would be a functional group. They were not. I assumed that the things that we were pitching were relevant to them, but I hadn't first listened to understand their needs. They're not in the business of partnering with public health or many other partners for that matter, and so understanding myself and positioning myself, I'm on the boundary of what they consider to be their core work. In fact, I'm not even sure if I was on the boundary. I was probably way outside their boundary, and we had come with them saying, like, for this campaign, since there's so many businesses along this street, it would be wonderful if we could make some local shopping bags. We'd have messages around shopping local and building healthy communities, like a word cloud kind of thing on these reusable shopping bags, and businesses could give them out. And the health department will pay half the price for like 10,000 bags, and you can use 80% of them BIA, and we'll just keep 20%. So we thought we were pitching this amazing deal, and it was completely falling on deaf ears. They were saying $2 per bag is too much. I said, that's with shipping and tax. Like, it's really cheap. But they weren't having any of it. And so we had to go back to the drawing board. We didn't know why they didn't want to partner with us. We thought we were offering an amazing deal, but we didn't take the time to understand what their needs were as a group, how to become relevant in their eyes. And so the next time we came back, we brought our friends at the region in economic development. And we pitched the idea of, let's do a breakfast for your membership. Because what they wanted to do was work on building a stronger membership and engagement in their membership. So the BIA came and presented, and we were kind of like an add-on. Hey, by the way, we'll give you these bags. And it worked. So I think sometimes partnership, for those of us who are in the business doing partnership, feels like you're going 90% of the way to do partnership, like 90% of the way to make that happen. But after that, like, everything just starts to run smoothly. So it's kind of, you got to give a lot to get a little, and keep things moving forward. And sometimes people don't always seem to know, in my opinion, what's good for them. But I think actually what the learning is, I didn't know what they thought was good for them. So that was my big learning.
Great. Thanks, Kendra. You shared, well, you didn't share the whole story, but we shared that idea on the phone, and I really appreciate hearing the story.
So that's a picture of me now that I see it's up. I'm in the stripes, yes. And that was the group, the counselor, the BIA person, and someone else that was partnering to make our website happen for that campaign.
Oh, amazing, amazing story. And when I heard you talking like that, I had just recently done a stakeholder reel, so it got me thinking, oh yeah, we always put those people out on the periphery, we're trying to bring them in, and we forget to do the stakeholder wheel of where they're at the center, right? Like you say, we're on their periphery, and what are their goals that they're doing at the center there, and that's what you did, and that was how you connected and moved forward. So thanks for that. We're going to move on to Julie McKercher, if she's still with us, and she brought with her our colleague Martine, because Julie's going to have to leave shortly. And so I'm going to ask you, are you both on the line?
We are both on the line.
Beautiful. Okay, so go for it. However you want to introduce, we definitely want to hear a story, that's all. Okay?
Sure. Okay, so my name is Julie. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm kind of yelling. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So currently, I am a capacity developer working in Western Ottawa for Western Ottawa Community Resource Centre. I work rurally for the most part, but I also work internally to do a lot of the capacity development to support organizational development. I also am leaving this field to go and do some form of community development, asset-based community development with the Ottawa Police. So this is a really salient, really important webinar that I would have liked to stay for the whole thing, because while the partnership piece I think is not easy and not simple where I am right now, it will definitely be harder where I'm going. So working as a police representative with community organizations will pose all kinds of other problems. Currently, I would say that having spent 10 years at Western Ottawa as a community developer-ish, my favorite moment was in 2016, where we completed an engagement strategy with 400 seniors. And what worked the very best for us was walking into an engagement strategy without any prescription and following the design of co-creation. So making sure that at every step of the way that every person had an opportunity to be engaged, and they're continuing to be engaged. So I think the co-creation model, which we pulled out of UK Public Health, was a bit of a lark, but it's actually something I'm going to take with me to every single job I do going forward, because it creates meaningful engagement for everybody, and it really highlights the best parts of asset-based community development. So I'll stop there. I'll let Martine introduce herself, because she's going to stay with you for the rest of the webinar.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that, Jewel. Martine.
Hi, I'm Martine Dorr, and I'm the Senior Manager of Violence Against Women and Counseling Services here at Western Ottawa Community Resource Centre. And I think I'll pick up where Julie, to speak about the partnership Julie was mentioning in developing our rural relationships. What I think I'm discovering now is that while we've been out there as an organization and engaged in co-creation around certain projects, mostly services serving older adults and persons with disabilities, now as we want to start sort of building on that and scaling it to a grander sort of population, other demographics, the need to go back and take those same steps all over again, that which you capture very well in your 6 strategies, the need to renew and to go back, that they're not linear steps, that we need to start engaging again with that, where the community is at and what they identify as a need, or maybe it's not even on their radar yet, but really celebrating where we are and then totally engaging in that co-creation process all over again, even though some of the players will be the same players.
That's great. I just wanted to ask you both about the co-creation. Did you have any resources related to that to recommend or put in the chat box? Because
yeah, I've done a Google search, but I'm having trouble finding something.
I saw Andrea working there.
I can definitely upload something. We used a lot of the UK Public Health information, so information out of Scotland and information out of UK Public Health. I can't even remember. I think it's NHUK, something like that. If I find it, I will send it your way. Yeah, it's pretty.
One thing that would be great, and probably putting in the UK, because I just sort of missed that part
sure,
earlier. So that's great.
There was one other scale. We had an evaluator do a lot of the work for us, and she had identified the Scottish scale of community readiness and partnership development. So that's something else I will upload because it's a pretty handy checklist to have when doing community engagement and partnership building. Sorry, I don't actually separate community building and partnership very often, so that's why I automatically went there. But I'll absolutely upload those for you.
Well, I think that cross-pollination is great. So thanks for doing that.
Okay, so I'm going to
bringing that in. Okay. So we've heard from Yvonne and Diane, and we've heard from Jessica, and Julie and Martine, and wait a minute, did we hear from Jessica?
Yes, we did.
We did, and Kendra as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we have heard from everyone. Now, just to let you know, if those of you have been watching the chat, well, a couple of things to just note if you haven't been watching chat, which sometimes I don't. Andrea's been posting some links of things as we talk about them, and looking for that link and putting it up for resources. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we were expecting Makana Ali to join us, but she's unable to. But we do have Shagun representing her and taking some notes and hopefully pitching in a bit on the chat box as we go along. So thank you for those rich introductions. I am so pleased we took this approach to our exchange because I've learned so much already.
Yeah. It's so great to hear from other people that are doing the work. It's not just me and Gillian talking.
Way better. I get to be part of the learning. We did do work to prep this. It's just a different kind of work. So we're moving on now to questions from you, from the various registrants, and we still have our fish swimming around in the bowl, but we also have the rest of you. We'd love to hear everybody's responses, but we will, with some of these, like based on what I learned from talking to some of our fish in advance, I might prompt you to thinking that you might be good to answer one of these. But anyone can always pitch in, and just say your name before you speak. That will be great. And if you're worried about just jumping in, just let us know in the chat box that you have something to add.
So I apologize that I actually had some very clever animations to make this slide look less overwhelming, but they have absolutely failed. So sorry about all these questions look all jammed in together. But what I did is I themed them out just a little bit. So we had 3 questions that had to do with keeping partners engaged. So we had someone who wanted to know about how do we keep partners interested over a long period of time. And I think that Jessica actually talked about this in your introduction, Jessica, because you talked about learning the priorities of the organizations that you're building a relationship with so that you can continue to tie their work and your work over time. I think that's really critical. We also had another question about getting stakeholders on board, and I bet none of you have ever experienced this. Sometimes a partnership gets really dependent on the organization that has been propelling the work forward, and then when that organization steps back, the partnership can start to flounder. And we also had a question around overcoming a rocky start to a new partnership, another situation none of us have ever been in when there is funding delays and there is a damage to some of the relationships that we've built. So I absolutely want to hear from our wonderful fish in a moment. One of the things I wanted to mention before we open up the line, however, is that these are 3 questions that go back to those 6 activities for successful partnerships. That taking the time to develop a shared understanding, create a common vision, to actually build that relationship and have everyone involved in the partnership can actually prevent some of these things from happening. And when you feel like some of these things are happening, then you can go back to those 6 activities. But I know that our fish on the line probably have some more specific examples of maybe some things that you have tried in one of those situations that maybe you want to share with us.
Yeah. In fact, Diane's put some stuff in the chat box, and you were on my list already, Diane, because you talked about team development and team performance models. So is that where you might be able to share some more with us here?
Well, I think I was building on the previous introduction person about the models and things that aren't linear, and it's the same thing with that. But I think the team building partnership building, to me, again, there's a lot of crossover between those two kinds of things. And so, as you say, there's some lessons to be learned outside that particular box. I think where I was going to go with in terms of the keeping partners engaged is to say sometimes we assume responsibility for things that we shouldn't. Partners are responsible for their level of engagement. We can certainly try to stay in tune with their needs and understand where they're coming from, but I think we put ourselves into a bit of a corner if we, as the coordinators or the support people, or even as just another person around the table, try to assume responsibility for keeping people engaged. So I do agree, linking it to their needs, that will keep them engaged. So being aware of that. The one thing, somebody mentioned the stakeholder wheel earlier, I think it was you, Gillian, and one thing that has helped me, it was a little bit of an aha, so I will say too, back in my green days, I love the stakeholder wheel. I love the idea of, understanding who's core and who's involved and who's supportive and who's periphery. But you can tend to look at things on paper as of quite static, a linear, or like a permanent kind of thing. So core people are always core, and peripheral people are always peripheral. And I think if we take a step back and see it more as ripples in a pond, then you can keep people engaged by not locking them into always being around the table. So that would also help to address, when a partner has to step back, there are people able to flow in and out and to mentor folks in understanding those different transitions. And I find that partners stay more committed when they have that flexibility of easing in and out of something than feeling like I'm locked into something for a year or for 2 years or 4 years. Things move so fast in this day and age that oftentimes we can't think that far ahead. So being a little bit more fluid and flexible in terms of your approach to establishing those relationships and expectations could probably go a long way to help.
It's Andrea. I'd love to build on that, if I may, because what Diana is reminding me of is a community group that I'm beginning to work with in Eastern Ontario. They're part of the Healthy Kids Community Challenge. And when they started developing their partnership 3 years ago, they heard very clearly from their partners that they didn't want a static, stable, formal partnership with terms of reference and partnership agreements and all of those kinds of things. Because of the way the Healthy Kids Community Challenge is shaped, there's a different focus for the program every 9 months. One focus might be around healthy eating, the next might be around physical activity. And so what the partners in this area really wanted was, just as you said, Diane, the ability to kind of flow in and out. And so they built this organic partnership where they've had people that have been involved for the entire 3 years to date of the partnership, but in different ways at different times. And that's given people the flexibility, like you mentioned, Diane, where sometimes if you give people a hard and fast line and say, you must come to one partnership meeting every month for 12 months, and this is going to be a 4-year partnership, sometimes people can't commit to that. But when there is that flexibility for people to flow in and out, that can really give people the opportunity. So I really love that example from Eastern Ontario of setting up this partnership that really allowed partners to select how involved they were at what point in time, knowing that that may change depending on the topic that they were working on, circumstances within their organization and their community, etc.
Okay. I wanted to add to that and then prompt one of our fish. I'm working with a partnership up in Temiskaming who are trying to do hub development work and, without any centralized resources. So a lot of it is often about people just being overly busy and being passionate, but doing this off the side of their desk, and that's challenging. And they were feeling tired, very tired at the last meeting, and there's been a lot of sort of work to be done. And all of a sudden somebody said, hey, we were talking about going down to, I think it's Parry Sound, to visit the hub there. And, that's a 4-hour day trip for, 4-hour drive, 8 hours of driving, day trip for us. So that's the northern perspective, isn't it? So that was great. Let's all get in the car together. Let's go. And all of a sudden the energy switched too. And they reflected at the end of their meeting when they decided, we're going to take a break from trying to move forward these focus groups. We're going to go on this road trip together. We're going to learn more about hubs and see, what comes out of that. So they kind of went off of their work plan, which is interesting too. And it did definitely create a reinvigoration. So the long-term outcome of that is still to be determined, but in the moment it certainly shifted things. So I wanted to invite Kendra, if you are able and willing, Kendra, to share some of your experiences reinvigorating partnerships. You talked about sometimes using resources from HC Link or from your heart health work. Do you have any stories or particular resources or approaches? Can I put you on the spot on that one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it might also tap into that second bullet as well. I think sometimes we feel like this pressure to move faster than a partnership allows, and that we don't really allow the time for like a slow build, and that maybe we should allow ourselves permission to do that despite what other people might be telling us internally about meeting certain milestones. On the other hand, I think that it's always good to keep your eyes out for opportunities to strengthen ownership within the partnership, not so that it doesn't rely just on yourself taking on tasks. I found that like when we do that sort of celebratory work of presenting at a conference or doing a write-up of some kind jointly together, that people start to see themselves in the work more and you kind of are forced as a group to understand and talk about things that you might not have had time to do before. Recently, a few of us got published in a journal. We just wrote a commentary, but that galvanized one of our partners so much. Like they were so excited about it, and then they applied to a conference and like, yes, go for it. And I want to build that sort of sustainability piece. So I think that looking for ways to celebrate and promote the work and for others to take the lead in doing that brings about ownership. And I think too, before that even happened, with like just getting excited about the work can be a nice precursor to empowerment and feeling like they can take control, because if they're interested and it's meaningful to them, the type of work we're engaging in, then they want to take more on. It's fun, it's interesting, it's bringing value to their workday. And in terms of helping it sustain over time, I think that we have to think with that systems approach, like what are those systems and processes in place where we can make it part of a work plan or part of something bigger. And that's a tricky one to sort of describe, but in a story way. But I think thinking about it in terms of not just a one-off, but like how do we embed it in processes, and now this is the way we do our business, is an important thing to be thinking about as we move along as well. So in terms of reinvigorating, I think it's looking for those exciting opportunities, and maybe it is, as other people have said, going back to those one-to-ones to find out what makes other people tick and motivates them and gets them excited about their work, and what doesn't is probably also just as important.
Yes, I like that, the what's not working piece. So were you moving, Kendra, onto that engaging municipal partners? Is that what you were making reference to at the beginning?
No, she was referencing the second bullet point.
Oh, the stakeholders one. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it could work for the municipal part too, in terms of a type of stakeholder partnership.
Mm-hmm. And Diane's picking up on that one-to-one again, which was her big secret. To discover what they find valuable, challenging. I'll just add on top of that, I once was in a partnership, a subcommittee of a partnership, a larger partnership, where I was feeling frustrated and burnt out after every meeting we had, and just brought back, I realized, what can I do about this, right? So came back to the next meeting thinking and proposing that we take some time for evaluation and reflection, and people were like, sure. you know, if you design something for us, we'll make the time. We'll make an hour. And so I went back then after that meeting, and you know, some of them were maybe more standard evaluation questions, but one of them was exactly this kind of question that you would have in a generally you would have in a one-to-one, which is sort of like, for yourself and why you're here, you know, what are you, in terms of your own personal organizational agenda, you know, are your goals being met and whatnot? And so we did do that in pairs first, and then we shared it all with each other. And this is a small group of like 8, right, in a subcommittee. And it really, I think it also really brought a lot of new insight among us. It worked on that shared understanding piece, and it certainly shifted my level of engagement. I was much more hopeful for our future, and sometimes it can be lack of hope or not seeing the way forward that can lead us towards a disengagement. So I had that experience, and that really turned things around for me. Do you think we should move on to the next question? Okay, so engaging municipal partners. I know, Yvonne, you are our municipal partner expert, so can we start with you?
Expert, wow, thank you.
Everyone's an expert. What in French we say expert de vécu, like you're an expert of in life, right? Yeah, go for it.
I think we're all in agreement that our municipal partners need to be at the table. So how do you engage them? How do you build that buy-in? And often I assist my communities in looking at going onto your municipal website and looking at what is their mission and vision statement, what are the values, what are their core priorities, so on and so forth. So when you do a community presentation, you are hitting those key points, right? And what is the value or what are the priorities at your current council level? And that being said, the number one thing that often gets missed at many council levels is that social planning piece, which again is one of the most viable, we call it the sustainable, one of the 5 sustainable pillars for community sustainability. And often municipalities get so wrapped up in the bricks and mortar, streets, water, sewer kind of thing, or creating that economic growth and building partnerships with businesses and job creation, that they often forget or don't put as much emphasis on that social planning piece. So it's your arts, culture, human services, or the social services within your organization, and kind of look at the community as a whole. So hopefully that makes sense. And I have a couple documents for engaging municipal partners, and I'm just trying to find them. Obviously, they're not at a quick click, so I will, if nothing else, send them, and we can add them at a later date. The other piece is in order to bring municipal partners to the table, what's of value? Sometimes you need to find that better use of a term, community champion, at the council table that will help you making sure that your municipal leaders are informed of what's happening, as well as I'm a firm believer in continuously going in front of council as a delegation and doing a presentation, not always asking for or having an ask, and often they see individual community groups or organizations come to a council level wanting, free stuff to funding, those kind of things. They just want to be involved. They want to be kept informed of what's happening. And use of a better term, sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission when it comes to municipal leaders. Does that answer your question?
That speaks to our question.
That speaks to your question, right? As a counselor, you're always, asked to be at the table, and often you have to weigh what's the most effective use of my time, because all those community groups or all those community engagement sessions are really important. So how you need to sell yourself the best.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at one of those sub-questions there is actually coming from Jessica, who's one of our fish, and I wonder if you want to pitch into this conversation, or did you get some of your question answered? Jessica?
Yes, sorry, I'm here. I'm here, yes, it's Jessica.
Yeah,
Hi, Jessica.
so that was, one of those questions came from you, if I'm correct, in reading my notes here from the registration form, which was probably a long time ago, about handling different views and competitive mindsets. Do you want to speak to that, or does anybody else want to respond to that one?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and perhaps maybe Kendra, working in an area that has both upper and lower tier levels of government, has experienced something similar to what I have. But I find that has been a challenge at times in that, yes, we have a partnership that is formed and we have a common vision, but at the same time there's this level of competition between the different municipalities and between certain divisions or departments from what I've seen. And so at times it's made it difficult, right, and trying to reiterate that, we're all here working together, because at the end of the day they are still serving their local municipality. And it's about the mind shift over time. And with some partners it has been easier to see that mind shift, or the buy-in is just innately there from the get-go. And whereas with other partners it's not. It takes a lot more effort and massaging and So I don't know if anyone else has any similar experiences or any tips for how to manage that or facilitate that level of competition with really strong personalities around the table when trying to work collaboratively.
It's Kendra from Halton. I do see power and politics at play big time, as you said, and I don't know what the answer is. What I do, I don't know if it's right or not, is I just work with the ones that are willing to, sort of that almost a passive least resistance, and work on things and demonstrate those things as examples of how we could work, like with other ones who are holding out for whatever reasons that I've yet to understand or learn. I feel like sometimes things are more complicated than I ever could imagine, and I'm not well-versed enough to play the game at certain levels. So for me, it's finding those people who are willing and seizing every opportunity to make a project come out of that partnership and celebrating that and putting it out there as an example, because you come to a group and they don't know what you're offering. We'd love to support you from public health, we say, and like, what does that mean? Like, nobody has any clue. So if we have examples under our belt that we can point to of successful projects, whether it's a research project or a social marketing campaign or something else, that begins to make things tangible, something that people can react to and sort of riff off of. So that's what I do. I don't know whether that's the right thing or not.
I'm looking back at
Thanks,
my notes.
Kendra.
Yeah, Kendra, thanks. And I'm looking back at my notes from you talking about the slow build. So it sounds like that's a piece of that as well, which I want to use that to move us on to our next area, the question being about engaging partners on long-term system change efforts. So we had a question, how can I engage siloed partners towards a long-term vision of transforming service delivery and then develop an action plan which can be measured for results? So we might not be able to tackle all of that, but how about that first part of it? When people are siloed and you're working towards a long-term vision. I'm wondering whether Martine, who I didn't get a chance to talk with in advance, but who works with Julie, but Martine, I think you said you're a manager in violence and women's services, so this person was talking about service delivery and sort of transforming that. Have you had experiences of trying to take on long-term change and bring in new partners for that? Martine? I know sometimes people go on to mute, so we like to give them a few seconds to get back. Are you still with us, Martine? Does anyone else want to think about responding to that? It's the third bold on our visual here, engaging partners on long-term system change efforts.
It's Diane, Gillian. I'll jump in.
Thank you.
I think this ties back to your observation about that there are kinds of themes and strategies, and you need to kind of be very flexible and adaptable. But it does come back to understanding, what the priority of that silo is, and where there are opportunities to collaborate on the longer-term vision and the service delivery piece. So again, I did some work when I was at Public Health in the area of built environment, healthy public policy, and trying to move from the silo of public health does healthy public policy, and land use planning just does land use and official planning, and transportation just does master transportation planning, and trying to, again, find where those circles kind of overlap in a bit of a vector diagram. And it does, again, come back to taking time to meet with people, understand what's on their plate, what they're trying to accomplish, and look for those opportunities where you can say, I can help you do that. Here's what we can do to support that. We're trying to accomplish this. We think you might be able to help us by doing X, Y. Does that sound like it's feasible to you, or where do you see yourself kind of fitting into the puzzle? I think the other piece is that oftentimes, and this comes back to the differing views and competitive mindsets, and sometimes that is what happens, why people get into silos, is that oftentimes people agree about the outcome. What they disagree about is the best way to get there. And so any flexibility that you can build into just identifying the outcome and letting people find their own pathway there. Why do we have to have our 8 municipalities all rolling out the same program? If they're going to achieve the outcome and they can think of a different way to do it that lets them strut their stuff and their creativity and the resources that they have involved, I say go for it. But oftentimes we want people to run things uniformly and roll it out all the same. And so again, coming back, understanding where people are coming from, understanding what you want the outcome to be. If they buy into that, let them find their own path.
It's Andrea. It really sounds like one of the themes from our conversation today is that notion of individuality and really getting to understand your partner and their priorities. I think oftentimes we meet with our partners and we want them to fit into what we want, but this is really about meeting our partners where they are at and understanding that, and then understanding how to pitch or craft our message so that they see that what we're doing can actually help them rather than the other way around. So I'm just going to move us along to our next next question, which I'm going to go through fairly quickly, and I'll tell you why. So the next question was around partnership evaluation. Can you discuss how one can best evaluate partnership work? Well, I would be absolutely delighted to, because I was very fortunate to work with Diane and also another colleague of ours, Samia Abdi from Public Health Ontario, very recently on a webinar on, sorry everyone, I'm just going to, wow, my animations have just gone wild. Wow,
it's animating.
What's happening? Where is my next slide? I have all these beautiful slides on partnership evaluation. There we go. Okay, so Samia and Diane and I did this little webinar on partnership evaluation, and the fantastic news is that Diane is actually the person that wrote these two resources for HC Link back in 2011, and I recently wrote a blog post which summarizes the approach to partnership evaluation, which I've just put the link in the chat box because we've got just a teensy bit of time left and so many good juicy things to talk about. So one of the things that we think about with partnership evaluation is that it's really on 3 levels. One level looks at how the partnership is functioning. The next level looks at the programs and the interventions that the partnership is doing, so what are they actually accomplishing it. And the third level looks at the change that we're actually making within the community. And within the blog post, to which I put the link in the chat box, I actually did a little case study on HC Link's partnership evaluation. And we have a multi-level approach that we kind of change around every year to take a look at how our partnership is functioning. So you can click on the link in the chat box, or you can just visit our website, hclinkontario.ca, to read that blog post, which summarizes the approaches to partnership evaluation. Also in the files box, which we're going to put back up before we end the webinar, there is a resource that lists several different resources for partnership evaluation. And if you do have any other questions about that, you can book a coaching session with Gillian or myself, and we can always talk through that with you and help you get sorted. Oh, I went one too far, Gillian. Structuring partnership work, I think, is the last question we were going to move on to.
Yeah, and then we have the one from the online conversation.
Yeah. Oh, don't let me forget that one.
Yeah. Okay, so so there's the final question there that was on the screen and may pop back up or may not. It's short. I can read it to you. I'm curious about how other health units structure this work. Do they have one specific staff member that deals with planning in the community, or is it separated by topic area? And I wanted to open this more broadly as well in terms of other structures. If we have Shagunas want to pitch in with how the community hub structures their partnership work, or anybody else as well. Initially, I thought that well, we have a couple of health unit people on, so actually I haven't targeted any fish in particular. Is anyone ready to pitch in on this one about the structures you use, and maybe what have been the advantages and the downsides of a particular structure?
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. What does it mean, one person dealing with planning or separated by topic area?
I guess the collaborative planning being done by one staff who works across themes, like we heard earlier. I think it was Diane who was talking about, is it around health policy or, urban design policy, those kinds of topic areas. So is it the same person who is sort of the partnership lead supporting partnership development across topic areas, or are there individuals working more thematically and collectively doing partnership work? Does anybody have an experience in terms of how that's been structured and the pros and cons?
I would say in Halton it's a bit of a hybrid. We have staff that are assigned certain topic areas, and then we have staff that are, for example, assigned to school, and they'll do whatever is appropriate in that school setting in terms of prioritizing in the community. So it's a bit of a hybrid, and it's an awkward thing internally to manage who's doing what, because of bumping into each other or not knowing who's doing what. It's an ongoing question. Who is doing what? Oh, I didn't know you were doing that. So I don't know if that's working, but that's been my experience, that we've got a hybrid in our health unit.
It's Andrea, and I'm just thinking about my own position within HC Link, because HC Link is a collaborative program that's shared between 3 organizations: Health Nexus, Ontario Healthy Communities Coalition, and Parent Action on Drugs. And when we were first established, we did this program together, but we also functioned in 3 separate agencies. And so the big question was, well, who's in charge of what, and who do we go to? And so we decided at the beginning to take a no door is the wrong door approach. And so any partner could approach anyone that they happen to have a relationship with and start a conversation. But that's pretty messy pretty quickly, because we were 3 different organizations with 20 staff across the province. And so one of the things that we did partway through, and this was actually a result of our partnership evaluation, identified that we needed to have one person that had a sense of what was going on across all of HC Link. And I am that lucky person, and that I tend to be the first point of contact for partnership relationships, or, in this question it would be related to community relationships. But that doesn't mean that I'm the only one that holds those relationships. So someone might have a general question about HC Link, or they might want to talk with us about a potential collaboration, and I might have that first conversation, but then if it has to do with, say, substance misuse or youth engagement, then I would engage Pat in that conversation, or I would help build that relationship between that new organization and Pat. So it's a little bit of that same hybrid model, Kendra, and it is really complicated because it is really hard to have a sense of what's going on, especially if it's within a big organization, but having that one person that holds some of those pieces can be really helpful. And we have someone from Haldimand Norfolk, where I actually worked at Haldimand Norfolk for a terrific year way back in 2006. So someone there is sharing, then they have individuals that are engaged in specific topic areas, and then also reaches out to people who are working in different topic areas. Many hands in the pot makes it difficult. That being said, I have many relationships and often start the partnerships because I've been here for 30 years. So thanks for sharing that.
And just pulling us back to the contribution before that from Shagun, which is speaking about the community hub, which I just really like the fact that you're also bringing in the perspective of the clients here, people coming in, how do they get an idea of how you're structured? Because I did some collaborative work up at the Bathurst Finch Hub in inner suburbs of Toronto, and with some of the people doing the community leadership there, and they've been involved for years, and they say, we still don't get how this hub is structured. So if we think about wanting to be accessible for residents and service users to be able to engage with us as partners as well, providing that information to them easily in the waiting room is a good place to start. And briefly to continue on that, like Shagun and McKenna work at the York Region Centre for Community Safety, and I'll try and put the link up to you afterwards because they are a hub, a community services hub for women and families affected by violence. And they have three different, I guess, governance kind of pieces within their structure where there's monthly meetings of both the frontline hub staff and of the hub member agencies. There's monthly meetings of the managers of those same agencies, and there's also a steering committee, which is more mixed. So those are some structures outside of public health, but structures is certainly part of partnership. So I think we're going to move finally to the question which came up on the online discussion. And I'll just, what'd you have? Oh yeah, okay, I'm going to move forward with that. I don't know if it's coming up. Is it coming up visually for us too?
I'm trying.
Okay, and it is longer, so I just want to kind of read you the essence of this. And it's from Ottawa Public Health, saying that our program is trying to engage with the public and with our community partners to have conversations about alcohol in order to advance public awareness and public policy. The program has also engaged these same partners with regards to opioids to increase awareness and emergency response. And our program would like to engage them also around cannabis. How do we avoid partner engagement exhaustion? And also there's an equity piece here too as well, in recognizing that some of the, well, a lot of these community partners, as there was a response that I put up online there, right, are sort of systemically underfunded. We do all feel a little bit of an underfunding crunch, but there's definitely a whole continuum there. And when we work with community groups, we can see just how exhausted and overstretched they are, even though we want their voice. How do we consult with them in ways that are equitable and rewarding for them, that they're getting their rewards out of the involvement? So does anybody want to weigh in on that? I was thinking Deborah, who actually contributed in the chat room maybe, or Kendra or Jessica or somebody who I haven't named. This is our final discussion question. And Andrea's just setting up chats for the concluding. I know there's a lot of text up there as well. Would anybody like to share their thoughts? Even, we don't have to come up with solutions all the time. It's also just to explore the troubling parts of our work, which is a little bit about what my response was, is like, yes, I continue to be troubled by this because I'm working in this context where this is a systemic problem. And, you know, how I want to have people's voices from the community, and I want to find ways to do that that are not going to just further be extracting, but also be nourishing their priorities. Because again, I think it comes to the same thing too about if are we on their periphery, and if so, how much might we be wanting to ask of them? Because I think in Ottawa Public Health question, there's a bit of that. Deborah, thanks for chiming in on that one. So saying that folks with lived experience are great go-tos for partnership. And how do we do that in a way that is rewarding for them and their priorities? Do you have any thoughts on that, Deborah? Being trauma-informed. That's a word that I heard about a couple of years ago, and I think I'm learning how to be trauma-informed. Do you have any key pieces or resources that you could send us to, Deborah, or would anybody else like to speak on the phone about taking a trauma-informed approach? Meet them where they are at.
Gillian, it's Diane. Not to link into the trauma-informed piece, but just to circle back to the original question. One thing that we can do is ask partners who else we could speak to about that issue, and perhaps they're working in partnership with someone else who might be willing to step up rather than always tapping them on the shoulder. So who can you refer me to? Who else do you think I should talk to about this? And if you ask that question several times, it's kind of like the 6 degrees of separation. You open up a whole new network that you may not know or have been on your radar, or maybe you haven't thought that people are interested in that. It's kind of like in volunteer management. Sometimes we used to get really excited. Oh my goodness, there's a computer tech that's applied to be a volunteer with my organization, and you have some computer problems, yet what they really want to do is they want to interact with people for a change because they've been behind the computer screen all the day, so they want to be, doing the friendly reading program or doing a community visiting program. So we may find partners in unusual areas that we don't know because it's a personal passion, not a professional one.
And I like that approach because it's asking them who are the trusted people that they would trust to inform us instead of me just deciding who else I might go to. Someone was going to pitch in there.
Oh, sorry, it's Kendra. I'm curious to learn more about what trauma-informed means. I'm not familiar with that term, so I'd like to be. But I was thinking of, someone mentioned the word burnout at one point on this call, and I have come across this definition that I just wanted to read out if that's okay. It's called, burnout occurs when passionate, committed people become deeply disillusioned with a job or career from which they previously derived much of their identity and meaning. It comes when things that inspire passion and enthusiasm are stripped away and tedious or unpleasant things crowd in. And I'm just thinking of the latter half of that, about things that inspire passion being stripped away and tedious and unpleasant things crowding in. I think if you streamline your process around you engaging the same partners but now about a different subject, a slightly different subject, like, avoid what my colleague calls administrivia as much as you can, like make it simple and easy to participate. They know how things go because they've been through it before, and so you don't have to spend a lot of time on process things. You can kind of get right down to it. Is maybe the one advantage of working with the same people. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's terrific, Kendra.
I looked up resources there, but don't have anything exactly to recommend yet on trauma-informed. But I do want to say what I do know from it is that it comes, or my experience of it is coming from both women's movement work and also from harm reduction movement. So both of those communities have really articulated that language and moving it forward. And it really is, I think, an opportunity. I mean, I haven't read so much about it, but I've definitely worked with people and partnered with community people who've used that language and who have taught me about that, which really involves a lot of listening and, learning about where their position is in relation to the work that I might be interested in doing with them. So it goes back to some of the early tips that were given earlier on, but certainly trauma-informed is also, I think, about learning about just how people who've experienced trauma, how that affects their work in a system which is still continuing often to reinforce that trauma, right? So trauma might have been an escalated event in the past, but it is something that is a part of the world they have to live in every day. And so when we work with them, having more awareness of that and being more open to learning from them about how to do that well. And I see Deborah's put in a few other helpful hints for us. And I think, Andrea, that we can go off from this webinar and do some learning.
I think we can. I hope we all can. I just wanted to quickly talk about a couple next steps because I can't believe how quickly the time has passed. So a couple of things. One is that as we mentioned earlier, that we do have coaching sessions that are available, and when we close the webinar, it'll automatically open up a registration form where you can sign up for coaching. Now, I know that a lot of the time when you go to webinars or go to seminars or something like that, someone says, oh, get a free 30-minute coaching session, which is really a sales pitch for purchasing services. I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that HC Link services, with the exception of our conference, are funded by the Government of Ontario, and therefore they are free of charge. So there's no cost to you for accessing your coach as many times as you want to, for accessing a consultant to come out to your community to facilitate some kind of community process. Just book a coaching session with Gillian or I. You can have as many as you like. You can call us whenever you need to, and we'll definitely be there to help. So please sign up for one of those sessions. And also, again, hashtag best conference ever, slightly biased. Please do register for our upcoming conference, Linking for Healthy Communities with Everyone for Everyone. It's in November at the incredible BMO Institute, and you can find all of that information on our website. We also want to say as a next step that all of the materials from today's webinar will be posted up on our website within the next few days, and I will also write a summary blog post. I don't know how I'm going to summarize this, but the blog post will include some links that have been posted in the chat box and some concepts like trauma-informed. And if anyone wants to contribute to that in any way, please just give myself or Gillian an email, and we can certainly have you contribute. I think we want to say a huge thank you to our fish, to everyone for being here, but especially to the really talented people that we've had contributing today.
Thank you. I just posted there. What's the thread that I took away from this? Follow the school of fish. I think that, you know, we can always learn from each other, but I have to say, you know, we put in some work organizing this and pulling it together, and it really has paid off because we've created the space where all these people who have such depth of evidence-informed practice themselves are bringing some of their key learnings to us. So thank you to Diane, Yvonne, Julian, Martine, Jessica, Shagun, and Kendra, and also to Deborah, as well as others who posted in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you. And look in your inboxes this afternoon. You'll get a follow-up email with some links to resources, a link to the coaching sign-up, as well as a short evaluation. Because this is the first time we've done this kind of format, we would really love to hear your impressions of it. So thank you so much, everyone, and really enjoy the rest of your day.